Alright YouTube, Fox News is at it again with their war on Christianity. Last year, famously, it was the war on Christmas, and at the time I pointed out, there is no such thing. Now it's just a war on Christianity in general. The idea that the terrible us, look at Europe, look at the United States, Christianity is in decline. Christian morals are in decline. Kids aren't learning the Bible in school anymore. They're trying to take God out of the pledge. And it's nonsense, of course. For instance, if you look at the Pledge of Allegiance, the mention of God was added during the Red Scare, sort of the Cold War era, to differentiate ourselves from communists. Before then, it didn't include the under God line. If you look at our money, the idea of putting God on our money, that our national motto was "In God We Trust," that was added in the 1950s. Before that, it was "E pluribus unum," from one many. Had nothing to do with God. Because our founders were deists. They understood that to put God all over the coins, and God in the schools, and God in the courts, and God everywhere you could possibly think, was a bad idea. This isn't a war on Christianity. This is a war to undo the changes that were made in the 50s and 60s and 70s by the people who were so terrified of those terrible atheists over in Russia and China that we had to magically differentiate ourselves, put on our spiritual armor, and suddenly suspend the First Amendment, allowing the Christian church to run roughshod over our rights. That's the real war. The war was against the gays and the atheists and the Hindus and all of these other groups that exempt themselves from Christianity. That's the war. It's like, look at the manger scenes. They were like, there was this city, and they were trying to put up manger scenes, but they bid on the locations. The different churches could make bids so that, generally each church would have its own manger scene. But those terrible atheists, they bought up 9 of the 10 manger scenes. So then they just decided, well, we're not even going to have fucking mangers this year. I ask you this, why is it that magically, when the atheist group obtains those locations and wants to put up atheist mangers, essentially, suddenly we're no longer going to bid on them? You can see the hypocrisy. If a Catholic church had bid them all up and taken them over, they wouldn't have had a problem with it, despite the fact that the Protestants would cry foul. And if some Protestant church with a heavy bankroll had bought up all of these locations, nobody would have given a shit. Because they're still Christians. They might not be Catholics, or they might not be Protestants, but they're still Christians. But atheist groups, that's a little bit too far out for us. It makes no sense. You have these people, you have that idiot Catholic priest on there, the self-appointed pariah of virtue on Fox News, coming on constantly talking about how we need to teach our children Christian morals. Guess what your Christian morals have led to throughout history? Genocide? Oh, that's fine. Slavery, witch burnings. These are all fine. That's in the past. Don't look at the past, kids. See, the Christian church and the people who get rich off Christianity, people like that priest or Bill O'Reilly or George Bush, people who use religion and probably aren't even that religious in reality, they make lots of money pushing the agenda of the religions. And the churches are more than happy to bankroll their political campaigns and their little speaking events and their evangelical mumbo-jumbo because they get a big return. For every 1,000 souls saved, you shall receive $10,000 checks. That's the way it works. It's a money-making scam. So when the church and their right-wing demagogue friends tell you that there's a war on Christianity, they're just trying to beat the war drums a little so they can get some more money. You gotta bankroll us. The atheists are crushing us. Guess what? They're also saying, look at the recession and look at the decline of religion. They must be related. Well, look at some of the countries that are doing pretty well right now. India is a Hindu nation, which also has a lot of Muslims in it. They're doing fine. Their economy is expanding rapidly. They're quickly becoming a first world power. They've got a huge military. They've got a huge infrastructure. The standard of living for the very poor is actually rising relatively quickly. There's less income disparity over there. They're doing fine. Look at the Scandinavian countries. More than 50% atheistic. They're doing fine. They've got the highest standard of living on the face of the earth. Look at Switzerland. Christianity has been declining there for some time. They even went so far as to outlaw the building of new mosques. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that with churches too, because they're fast becoming an atheist culture. They're rich! These parts of the world that are actually doing very well are either a-religious or practice a religion other than Christianity. Look at, and they say, well, the terrible atheism will destroy us all. Well, China seems to be doing better than we are right now, and 74% of the United States is still Christian. Explain that one to me. It doesn't make any sense. You got nations like Japan or, any of the nations over in the East that are actually doing fairly well or about the same as we are. A lot less Christians over there. It doesn't make any sense. But the idea behind there being a war on Christianity is so ludicrous, it's insane. The idea that, oh, well, we don't want creationism taught in our schools, so we must be going to war against God. No, we're not going to war against God. We're going to war against ideas that are terrible. It is a terrible idea to put religion in the schools. It is a terrible idea to put religion on our money. It's a terrible idea to have religion in our courts. And if you look, and I've pointed this out on forums before to many a chuckle, if you look at what the extreme right wing is declaring should be the way of the United States, it coincides almost exactly with the things that the Taliban says over in Afghanistan. Women should be, kept in the kitchen, or not kept in the kitchen, but I don't know about those abortion rights. I don't know if women should have those. Sort of going to war on women. Well, gays, we shouldn't have gay marriage. Gays shouldn't be allowed to be openly gay in the military. All these ideas. Sounds a little bit like Taliban-esque to me. Oh, well, we're against all forms of gun control. And even though I agree with them on that, it's still a little bit like the Taliban. We need more God in our schools. We need less. They even go so far. Some of these individuals, and it's scary, they go so far as to say we should do away with public schools and make them all private and give people vouchers. That businesses or rich individuals should run all the schools in the country. These people are insane. They have absolutely no idea what reality is, and wouldn't if it came up and kicked their ass. These people are nuts, and it shouldn't be a surprise that they're nuts. They honestly think, some of these people, that the world is 6,000 years old. That if you say God damn, you will suddenly be struck by lightning. They actually believe these things. They believe in talking snakes. They're loonies. If they weren't Christian, and if it weren't that the lunacy of the past was allowed to persevere in this country, we'd label them lunatics. Some of the more hardcore fundamentalists are so out of balance and so mentally detached from reality that if it weren't for their claims that a God inspires their lunacy, they would be in a straitjacket right now. That's the truth. These people essentially have a mental condition. Now, that doesn't mean I say, well, we shouldn't allow religion. I have no problem with Christianity existing. It's a problem when it begins to intercede on my rights. As an atheist, as an individual who doesn't give a crap what the Bible says, I don't care. I don't require an Iron Age morality to keep me from going around killing people. I don't need it. I've got my own brain. I've got logic. I know better than to go out and gun down 20 people. I don't need some book to tell me that if I do, that I'll suffer forever. And then they say, well, the Bible and all these religions, they give people morality, they make people better people. No, they don't. Are you truly a better person if the only reason that you avoid doing bad things is because some God told you? I would think that that would make you less moral than someone who doesn't believe in a God but still chooses not to do anything bad because they feel it's not right. That's the true test of morality. They're not going around raping and killing and maiming and molesting kids and committing genocide. If you want all of that stuff, read the Bible. Read the Quran. Read all these ancient manuscripts. There's lots of war, slavery, genocide, all sorts of good... Oh my goodness, it's great stuff. That's great morality to teach your kids. Do you not see why this is just a little bit loony? Do you not see why it's a little bit loony when Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity comes on TV and talks about the war on Christians in a country that's made up of 3/4 Christians? In a country that explicitly talks about God on the coins, God in the pledge in schools, which, by the way, should be considered unconstitutional, to God everywhere. You've got so much pressure on businesses that most of them do not dare not put up a manger scene for fear of being seen as anti-Christian. It's Christianity flexing its collective muscles. It does this at least once a year. Every Christmas, the right-wing media comes out, and by the way, the mainstream media in the country is right-wing compared to the ones you'd find in Europe. Compared to Europe, CNN is right-wing. They come out year after year and try to stir up trouble. Well, Walmart did this, and McDonald's did this, and these people refuse to put up a 20-foot tall gleaming diamond statue of Jesus Christ. Guess what? What you call Christmas, when people say Merry Christmas this, oh, here's a gift, praise Jesus. The kind of Christmas that most Christians celebrate is complete delusion too. Not to mention Christmas is actually based on pagan Yule, and it's a complete plagiarization, like everything else in their cult, of a pagan form. But let's leave that alone. Let's just look at the way most Christians practice Christmas. They might go to church, if you're lucky. They might just go out to the shopping mall and rack up $500-600 of debt. Does that sound like something Jesus condones? And then you've got these same right-wingers magically ignoring what Jesus said in the first place. Well, those liberals, they're terrible, godless people, but ironically, Jesus sounds like he's pro-welfare in the Bible. But he never talks about thou shalt own guns, thou shalt stone gays, thou shalt ostracize disobedient kids. He never mentions that. That's all either Old Testament or it's the work of Paul. And I've said for some time, in a way, the right-wingers are actually further from Jesus' teachings than the most far-left individuals. It sounds almost like Jesus was supporting socialism, if you actually read the Bible. But then again, it's hard to get through to these Christians. Most of them haven't read the Bible. I've read the Bible many times. I've read the Bible from front to back many times. I've read individual books many more times. I've read it much more thoroughly than I'm sure 99% of Christians. And here's the reason. I'm not a Christian. If I was a Christian, I would go to church, I would read the parts of the Bible the pastor told me to read, and I would never pick the Bible up at home. I wouldn't want to. I would want the pastor there to answer my difficult questions about why does 1 Timothy 2:12 endorse women remaining silent and not speaking? Why does the Bible talk about all these stonings and genocides? And what about that passage in Judges, which supposedly you've got an omnipotent, all-powerful God, but he suddenly lacks the power to drive people out of the mountains because they happen to have iron chariots? These are difficult questions I want the pastor to answer, because the pastor can smooth them over and say, oh, well, the ways of the Lord are mysterious. Oh, well, that takes a load off my mind. So no, the idea that there's a war against Christianity is ludicrous. There aren't enough people to wage a war against Christianity. Christianity is a multi-trillion-dollar-a-year industry. It's the ultimate hypocritical commercialization of religion. It's the most commercialized religion. You know, you're not a good person if you don't have this little plastic Jesus. And you see ads this time of year on Fox for like miracle spring water from Jerusalem, for crosses that have been blessed by priests. You see those advertisements along with gold line. You know, you've got to invest in gold because Obama's going to collapse the economy because he's a terrible Muslim who hates the USA. Oh, and power wheelchairs because most of their viewers are over 60. There's no war on Christians. There's a war on stupidity, there's a war on bigotry, there's a war on inequality. That's not a war on Christianity, unless Christians endorse bigotry and violence and stupidity. So maybe if these individuals would stop being so stupid and violent, they wouldn't feel like there was a war against them. It's 2012, not 1812. There's a difference. And these people need to realize that. And it's